How are you? Rush Limbaugh, having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. The most listened to radio talk show in the country, the Rush Limbaugh program here on the EIB network. This is Dan Rather, CNN Tonight, last night with Don Lemon. Rather has a show somewhere? Is that right? Have you ever heard of the AXS network? It's called Access. That's where Rather has a show now. It's called The Big Interview. I had never heard of the AXS network. And look, I'm a broadcast media specialist, and I've never heard of this. Not that I don't mean that to be necessarily cutting of Rather. I'm just observing that he's a big name. He was the former anchor of the CBS Evening News at Tiffany Network. Well, anyway, he's over at CNN. He's talking to Don Lemon, who says these riots and this Trump stuff and Trump warning of riots, and I'm just going to say it the way the media is saying it. These riots that Trump is predicting, these riots that Trump's warning, these riots that Trump's... What do you think about that, Dan? I mean, this is really bad, right? Remind you the way of Chicago, 1968 Democrat convention. You were roughed up at that convention, right, Dan?
Yes, it has that potential. The 68 Democratic convention, where, yes, I was roughed up inside and there was violence inside and outside, can be instructive for this year. When people talk about a brokered convention and a convention maybe taking away from Trump, quote unquote, and Trump talks about possible riot, that could lead to a situation where you have good television, if you want to call it that, a very contentious reporters, journalists dream of a convention, but terrible for the party.
What about for the country, Dan? What about would riots at the Republican convention? Why, it'd be great for the networks. It would be great for TV. There you have, if any of you keep asking why so much coverage of Trump, it isn't biased in this case. I mean, it's most of the drive-bys, actually, none of them are going to vote for Trump. Most of the drive-bys, are in the tank for Hillary. I would venture to say that most of the drive-bys are of the school of thought that Trump will lose in a landslide. I think people that live and work in what we call the Washington-New York corridor, the media capital power corridor, they all groupthink. I mean, the thinking is identical. The reporting on all the networks is identical. That's why I always say, if you miss CBS Evening News, watch the ABC World News Tonight. If you miss that, watch the NBC Nightly News. Miss that, turn on CNN, and go on down the line. But if you miss this show, there's nowhere else to get what happens on this program. But they can't say that. They are uniformly identical. And not only in the way they report, but the way they think. And I'm telling you, they all think, there may be a couple stragglers, but they all think that Hillary is going to just clean up if Trump is the nominee. But by the same token, the reason they're giving Trump all this attention is not because they're pro-Trump. It's because the guy can carry an hour of television by himself and get better ratings than the original programming these networks are offering. Have you ever stopped to look at it that way? Here, let's say you're watching Fox. Pick any hour in the daytime, and all of a sudden, a Trump rally. They will bump out of it, and they will go to the Trump rally. And in many cases, up to now, they have stayed with it for the full hour. CNN does the same thing. I guess they do at MSNBC. I never have them on. And the reason they do is because it generates ratings, it generates attention. They're able to elevate advertising revenues for that period of time. It's business. But it's also programming. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is a lot of material you have to come up with to fill. When you have a lot of producers, a lot of writers, you got reporters, you got camera people out there collecting the data, video, audio, editing it, producing it, and all that. With Trump, you just got to turn the camera on and let him go. It's easy. Everybody gets a break, little timeout, little mini 1 hour coffee break while they go do what they do and watch Trump. And then the added benefit is that Trump is going to, in their world, make news 10 or 12 times in that hour by virtue of what he says or how he says it. There isn't any other candidate in this race, even going back to the days when there were 17 candidates, that has anywhere near that ability. And don't get mad at me. Folks, I have attempted in I don't know how many ways, patiently and in great detail, attempted to explain it to anybody who's curious about it, doesn't understand it. I've explained it from the standpoint of why the media is fascinated. I've explained it from the standpoint of why Trump supporters are Trump supporters. What is it about Trump that glues his supporters to him where other candidates don't have that kind of attachment? Their voters are highly excited, of course supportive, but they don't have a connection like Trump does with as many people. I've gone out of my way to try to explain it. And even today, as I said at the top of the program, the conservative intelligentsia is still pulling its hair out, trying to explain it to themselves. They are writing pieces at their various publications. You'll see a piece in the New York Post, you'll see a piece of commentary, a piece in the Weekly Standard, every one of the blogs. Every day, somebody will do a deep analytical piece trying to explain Trump. Well, I've done it. I've explained it to you every which way from Sunday. From the perspective of my understanding. So it's not a mystery to me in any way, shape, manner, or form. And it doesn't threaten me. Now, this is another key, folks. You would not believe the number of people, not even in politics, who are threatened by this thing Trump is doing. Naturally, people in politics feel threatened by it at every level and for all kinds of reasons. But there are people in media who feel threatened by this. Trump is showing he's better than practically anybody at media in attracting an audience, in holding an audience. And he doesn't need a producer, and he doesn't need a writer or writers, and he doesn't need a director. There's a whole lot of people threatened by this on a whole lot of different levels. Like I discussed yesterday, Donald Trump has turned the standard operating political formula upside down. There's a formula in professional politics about how you get elected. You have to hire a consultant, you have to hire pollsters, you have to hire data analytics people, you have to hire spokesmen, you have to hire get out the vote people, you have to hire. You got to, and then you have to get the best to do what they do, and you have to listen to them. You have to plan to the nth detail every minute of the day, every appearance. Trump's done none of it, and has, in the process, illustrated that maybe if I were in the professional politics business, I would feel so threatened right now, because I'm looking at somebody who has demonstrated that my expertise isn't necessary. I would think, if I'm a consultant, if I'm a spokesman, if I'm a policy analyst, if I'm I'd look at this whole Trump phenomenon. Oh my God, I'm not needed. People are going to realize. People are going to realize I don't need it. Let's say you're a foreign policy advisor for candidate X. Trump doesn't have any. He's leading the pack. So it's no wonder that he's going to be criticized for everything he's doing. People have turf to be protected here, folks. This is huge, what's happening here in all kinds of, and so explaining the anger, the envy, the resentment, the jealousy, the fear. I mean, it's all there. People are afraid of Trump. People are envious. People jealous. People frightened. People fearful. People threatened. It depends on where you go. But all of those facets are accurate. And it's just, it's upsetting and unnerving, which is why so many of these people are hoping and praying that Trump implodes. They are hoping and praying that Trump loses in a landslide. They are hoping that disaster comes to Trump. Because if disaster comes to Trump in one way or another, they will be validated as still necessary. They'll be able to say, Trump, he tried to do it without us. He tried to do it without a consultant. See what happens to you? He tried to do it without a good spokesman. See what happens to you? He tried to do it without a foreign policy team. See what happens to you? He tried to do it without a pollster. That's what they want to be able to say down the road. Here's another thing that scares them. Trump is improv. What are you whispering about in there? What are you whispering about in there? No, I'm serious. He is improv. There is no speech writer. That's another group of people that aren't employed by the Trump campaign. There's no writer. And have you noticed other campaigns where there are speech writers? Have you noticed no matter when the campaign or when the candidate speaks, it's the same speech? It's called the stump speech. And have you noticed that it's practically word for word at every stop? Every election night, whoever wins goes out and says whatever they said last time they won. If they didn't win, they go out and said what they said last time they came in second place, third place. Never changes. Because everything's so tightly scripted. Everybody is scripted in a way so as not to say something that could be damaging. So you pull back and you don't say anything. Meanwhile, Trump has no boundaries. Like my old necktie line. No boundaries. It's improv. Say whatever you... This is not supposed to be happening. This is threatening on so many levels. So they're all hoping for disaster. They're all predicting it. They want the riots. They want Trump to be responsible for the riots. There's a whole lot of livelihoods that have nothing to do with who wins the election riding on this, folks. A whole lot.